welcome to today's class all about shadow work. So, when I talk about shadow work, I get a ton of questions, and I wanted to kind of record this mini class. It's the best thing I know how to call it, and we're going to just talk all about shadow work. What is the literal definition of shadow work? Where has it come from? When I talk about doing shadow work, what are some real life examples? What are the things that I'm talking about? And what are ways that you can do this work in your daily life? What are ways that you can start being uncomfortable, so to speak, and making these changes and perspective shifts in your belief and your identity as a whole, right? So, when I talk about shadow work, okay, the literal definition of shadow work is this: it is the psychological and spiritual practice of exploring the unconscious parts of your mind, known as the shadow. This was coined by Carl Jung. He has a lot of beautiful work on so many things. He was a psychologist who would also be considered a mystic to some. So if that is something that interests you, please feel free to check him out. When we look at this literal definition, we talk about shadow of the mind. But for me, when I look at this and I express it in a way, I mean to go deeper than that. So that is the shadows within your auric field, the things that are repeating, the cycles that are repeating, the emotions that seem to keep coming up, the times where you feel out of control, the same places in your body that are repeating patterns, whether it's chronic pain, intermittent pain, you're noticing autoimmune things. That to me is the shadow in totality, especially if we're looking at ourselves as human beings on a whole fundamental level. So, with that, when I talk about doing the shadow work, what I'm referring to is integrating all of the parts of you that you don't understand, you don't want to look at, you're ashamed of, you feel guilty about, you're afraid of. And I can't tell you how many people are truly afraid at a core level to look at themselves in the mirror. It is so much easier for us as a society and as human beings to examine what everybody else is doing, what everyone has going on for them, while continuing to ignore us, because it's easier to reflect outward. And this is why a lot of the times, if you are someone who has the ability to see into people's patterns and their energy, you'll oftentimes have them feeling intimidated and offended because you can read them like a book, right? And that's a book that they're afraid to open or they don't want to look at. And so there's all this guilt and shame, and you are making them feel vulnerable by being able to see it when it's something they don't even want to acknowledge. And this is kind of the cat and mouse game of what we call, in my opinion, the woke people versus those that are still asleep. And all that is are you willing to step into your power and realize who you are, how you function, and why you are the way you are on a fundamental level? So, with that being said, when you are going through this and you're asking yourself these questions, I want you to just be very honest. Are there times in your life that you're afraid to talk about, even to yourself? You're afraid to think about? Are there things that maybe you're not afraid to think about, but your answer to them is, oh, it is what it is. Oh, it'll be fine. Oh, it is what it is. Well, it was a long time ago. Oh, it could have been worse. Other people have it worse than me. Those are all ways that we deflect instead of taking responsibility and accountability for the way we feel. So, I'm not saying take responsibility and accountability for the action, because a lot of the times the action wasn't yours, but your reaction and the way you feel about it now is your responsibility. This is why we always talk about forgiveness isn't for the other person, it's for you, right? It's about unburdening that energy, that restriction flow, whatever is blocking you from being able to go to the next step. When we hold that resentment and we hold those big feelings of that sort about a situation, that is usually something and a pattern that will repeat itself because we have yet to learn the lesson of what it looks like. So, some of the ways that I talk to people, especially in shadow alchemy sessions, is learning to identify how you feel, right? So, what I mean by that is learning to identify what are your feelings in the moment. So, if you are in, say, you're in a high stress situation, like you're at a really busy market or a really busy concert, and all of a sudden you start to get really angry and annoyed. This is one of those situations where you would pause and take a step back and be the observer in your life. Are you feeling this way because you're overstimulated? Is there too many people in the way that you're taking on other people's energy? You're taking on other people's emotions. Are you having a sensory issue? Is it too loud? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? These are the simple ways that when we are actively feeling a certain way or having a reaction, we need to take a step back and look at it and be able to ask ourselves, why am I reacting this way? Why do I feel this way? A lot of the times for me, when I see someone being belittled or bullied, I am the first person who will say something. And I used to not be kind in my responses. And these days, I do my best to observe and only speak about certain things when necessary. And the reason that is because I used to automatically jump because I knew what it felt like to be picked on and have nobody there to help you with it. And so I didn't want anyone to feel that way, and so I would go out of my way, right? And in turn, I would find myself in these weird situations out in public all the time where this stuff was happening, and I had to realize that I can't step in for everybody. I also can't project the way I would want someone to do something for me on other people. And so through that, I had to look at why do you respond the way you respond that way, and how can you stop responding from that emotional space, right? And this is also what we talk about when we say emotional intelligence. It's understanding at a fundamental level why you feel the way you feel. And I can promise you to the stars that if you are someone who gets a firm grasp on your feelings, why you feel them and how you experience them, there is not a single feeling or a manipulation that anybody can do to affect you. And that is because you will know yourself at such a purely fundamental level, okay? You will know yourself at such a fundamental level that there is nothing anyone can say to distract you from your truth, who you are, and what you know about yourself. And there's also nothing that anybody can tell you about yourself that you don't already know. And in being able to understand yourself, you're able to understand and connect in with your fellow man. And the reason I talk about this is explicitly things like, once you understand how to love yourself at a fundamental level, you can now express and show love to other people, not from what you think it is or what it's been emulated as, but from a deep and knowledgeable understanding, you are now able to share that feeling with someone. It's the same thing with compassion. If you are in a space to give yourself grace and compassion and kindness, you will be able to show this to your fellow man. But if this is something you do not know how to give yourself, how would you know how to express it to other people? You wouldn't, right? And so a lot of times this is where I see communication breakdowns because someone believes they're being compassionate, the other person doesn't feel that way, and the reason is because it's not true compassion, it's just two people with their own thought, perspective, and emulation of what they think compassion should be, not because it's something that's understood at a fundamental level. This is why I always say I am a very literal person. I take things very literally, and if there is a problem that I need to solve, one of the first things I do is look at the literal definition of what I'm working with. And I've done this with my feelings before, right? What is the literal definition? What does this come from, and what does it feel like, and what does it seem that it may be, and what does it look like? And the more you're able to step back and observe yourself in these situations, you'll understand, wow, this is why I react this way. Wow, this is why I feel this way. The other part of shadow work too that I feel a lot of people don't talk about is there are so many people who have what they call racing thoughts, and it makes it hard to sleep. It makes it hard to do all these things. You have to stay busy all the time. You need to listen to music. You can't sleep without noise. All these things. And what it really is are you ready to face the noise in your head instead of distracting yourself from it? That is the shadow. Because really, this is about taking control of all the thoughts that are going on up there. So what I mean by that is not every thought is yours. Your brain isn't even creating thought, it's receiving thought from consciousness in the ether, right? So with that understanding, why would you go out of your way to make yourself all muddy in the head, right? If you know that you have a choice of what you accept and what you don't accept, you are fully aware of what your reality can look like. And this is where people drop off with, I can't just make myself feel this way. I can't just do this. Have you ever heard of the term fake it till you make it? Because that is how this starts. This is why we always talk about saying a couple things that you're grateful for, practicing gratitude and presence. And the more you are able to work with that, the more you're able to step back and be the observer. Because how are you supposed to observe your life if you're running errands, you're doing all these things, you never take a moment to sit and be still with your thoughts? This is where all the noise comes from. This is where everything starts to boil over and get overwhelming. And this is where people shut down and start repeating the cycle. So the very first step I always suggest to shadow work is that if you are someone who is new to this and you have so much noise in your head that you have to distract yourself from it, or you have to go out of your way to calm it down, then I ask you, what are you afraid of to sit with and find out? And what is the noise that you're trying to quiet? Have you even ever tried to listen to it? So if you are someone who is new to shadow work, I am going to ask you a simple question before you watch this any further. Are you ready to make a commitment to yourself that is lifelong? Because as you start to develop shadow work skills, you are now taking control of your life and steering the ship to your reactions, the way that you approach things, the way that you see things, the morals and belief that you hold. And once you start to fully see it, you can't unsee it. So, if you are not new to shadow work, I would ask you to sit with, why are you feeling a blockage that you're doing something wrong? And more than that, and I would say that most people have felt this way at one point in their life, but you think you should be further along than you are. And that in itself is part of the lesson. And this is one of the reasons that I try to tell people not to ask for lessons on patience, because having patience with yourself is already the biggest lesson that there is. I used to be this person. I used to be impatient with everybody, and the reason is because I was impatient with myself. I expected myself to be quick on the spot. I expected myself to be right, to do things perfect the first time, and to be better than everybody else. And that standard I held myself to is the way in which I interacted with the world, right? That impatience with myself, that restlessness with myself is how I treated other people. And so this is why I always tell people, if you come across someone who's rude, they're gossipy, whatever it is, just know that they're also sabotaging themselves in that own way. If they are saying horrible things about you, you should hear what they're saying about themselves, because I guarantee you it is 10 times worse than whatever you could imagine. And this is how I have learned to understand where people are at, because I've sat with myself and done enough of the work that I know every nook and cranny of myself more than anyone else ever could. And by knowing me at that fundamental molecular level, there is nothing anyone can tell me or control me to do, because I am the creator of my own reality. It doesn't matter to me if someone doesn't like me, if they don't validate me. I am not for everybody. And that is something I had to learn over time. I used to dress a certain way. I used to do my hair a certain way. I used to do all these things to try to assimilate into society. And I used to want to assimilate with people that I didn't even fucking like. I used to try so hard to sit at tables that I didn't even really want to be in, but I thought I needed to be there. And those are the things that kept me away from my purpose and stepping into my power. And so if you are someone who still finds yourself trying to find validation, even on your growth journey, why? The only validation and expression you should need is from yourself. Because once you're able to be your best friend and validate yourself, nothing else on the outside will matter. And that way, you start to change your perspective on how you interact with the world. So if this is your moment, you are ready to do the shadow work, I'm going to give you the very first simple exercise that I gave myself and that I gave everybody else since then. For the next week straight, I want you to take 15 minutes a day. I want you at least to write 3 things you're grateful for within that 15-minute period. I want you to sit and just be present and notice how your body feels. I want you to notice what kind of thoughts appear, what kind of images, what repeating thoughts appear. Do you feel certain spaces in your body? Does one side feel heavier than the other? Do you feel an energy center that seems more active than others? Learning these very simple cues and getting in touch with your body wants you to know is built and formed this way. This is the same way you form a relationship with your guides, is by being present, sitting, listening, and learning, and just being aware. Believing is seeing. Seeing is not believing. Thank you guys for joining me for our very first mini fundamental class on shadow work. What is it and why is it important? I hope you guys have a beautiful day or night, and I want to give you one more friendly reminder. If you are someone who is thinking about going into doing this work and sharing your gift with other people, I would like to remind you that your shadow work is so important to the readings you do and the way you interact with others. Be mindful of the undertaking that is to come with being able to do your own work on top of being able to help others with theirs. Not being able to keep up with both is where you will run into a brick wall. I hope you guys have a beautiful day, and I will see you next time.